Hey guys, this is Tyanitis, and today I'm going to show you how to navigate the new card collection screen. I'm going to explain all the parts of that screen to you, show you how to build a basic deck, explain a little bit about the purity system, and then go over what constitutes a legal deck and what makes an illegal deck. The first thing we need to do is to navigate that new card collection screen. There are two ways to do that. One, you could simply scroll over two screens to your right, and that'll take you there. Or you can simply come up to the top here and click on Cards button, and it'll take you right to the screen. The first thing we're going to do is go over all different parts of the main screen here. Starting on the left, you'll have a card display. This is basically showing you what the card looks like. It's got all the information for the card, and it's based on whatever card you currently have last clicked on over here, or even right here. Right below that, when we get into deck building, you have two buttons. You have the Add Card button and Add Commander button. They're pretty self-explanatory. Whenever you click on the Add Card button, it will add that card, as you saw, over to the appropriate area over here. If it's a character card, it'll go to character, ability to ability, and so on and so forth. When you click the Add Commander button, it will add that card up into the commander slot, of which you can only have 3 commanders. I'll go over that a little bit more in depth once we get there. Over here, you'll have collection and a number. Whatever that number is basically how many cards you have completely on that account. Right below that is a list of all the cards you have. It'll have the name, the number of cards, and its purity, which we will go over a little bit later. Whenever you click on those cards, as I showed you earlier, it will pop it up to your left. Moving over to the right, you'll have the breakdown of the current deck you have selected. It goes by commanders, characters, abilities, locations, and artifacts. And right next to each of the subdivisions will have a number of how many cards you have in each category. Over on the top right here, we have cards in deck, and right below that you'll have the number of however many cards you currently have in the deck selected. Right below that is the power curve. This is a bar graph that basically breaks down your deck and shows you how many types of cards in each resource category are in your deck. So for the 1, that means that's how many cards you have that are a 1 resource, 2 resource, and so on and so forth. As you can see in my deck currently selected, there's a lot of 3s, a lot of low resource cards. There are no 8 resource or 9 resource cards, and a few 10 plus. Below that is card types. It's once again just another breakdown of the deck in bar graph form. It'll show you how many characters, abilities, locations, and artifacts you have in that deck. And right below that is the deck legality. This will tell you whether or not your deck is legal, which this one currently is, or illegal. If your deck does become illegal at any point, it will give you a brief explanation of why your deck is illegal. Moving on over to the top buttons on the screen, you have this button over here, which is the deck selection button. It'll bring you up to all the decks you have currently saved on your account, and you'll be able to select a deck from there. The new button is exactly what it says. Whenever you want to create a new deck, go ahead and click on that, and it'll bring up a blank slate for you to start creating a new deck. Save. Whenever you are either finished creating that deck or aren't finished yet but you want to come back to it at another time, click Save, and it'll save what you currently have stored over here. Save as. Let's say you pulled up a deck you've previously saved and you've made slight modifications to it, but you still want to keep that original deck and the new modified deck. Click Save As, and it'll save that those modifications you made, and it'll allow you to rename it, and it will make it into a completely new deck. The rename button is just like it sounds. Whatever deck you currently have selected, if for whatever reason you no longer like the name you gave it, you can give it a new name. And the delete button, once again, just like it sounds. Whatever deck is currently selected, if you hit this button, it will delete that deck from your group of decks over here. So let's go ahead and create a new deck. the first thing we need to do is go up to the New tab and click on it. It's asking me right now if I want to save the current deck first. I already have it saved, so I'm just going to select No. Now it's going to ask me to enter a name for my new deck. So let's name it Example. And click Create. Now as you can see, we have a blank slate to begin with. There are 0 cards in the deck. You can tell from looking just everywhere. This deck, there's nothing in it. The first thing we're going to do is select our 3 commanders. So let's go ahead and go through our collection, and we'll pick a Secluded Constructor. Come over here, after selecting the card, click on Add Commander, and it goes up into the commander slot. We will also select a Beast of Burden and a Candid Head Researcher. There, we now have all 3 of our commanders selected. At this point, we're going to start talking about purity. To know what a card's purity is, you can look in 2 spots. On the card itself, right here, it'll have the faction symbol down here. And depending on how many of those symbols there are, will tell you what the purity cost is of that card. You can also see it over here on these colored dots. However many dots there are tells you the purity of the card. As you can see right here, Demon of Gluttony is a 2 purity card. And as you can see, it has 2 of the Varor's faction symbols at the bottom of it. The reason this is important when it comes to deck building is because you're only allowed to use cards whose purity level is at least the same as or less than the purity level of your deck, and that is determined by your commanders. Each commander we have selected will give us a 1 purity limit towards their faction. Right now we have 1 commander from the Genesis Industries faction and 2 commanders from the Varor faction. That means our current deck limit as far as purity is concerned is Genesis cards of a 1 purity, Varor cards of up to 2 purity, and any factionless cards, as factionless cards are not hindered by purity. This also tells us that we're not allowed to use any of the other factions we don't have selected. Since we have no Warpath commanders, we aren't allowed to use any of the Warpath cards. Same thing goes with Flame Dawn, Descendants of the Dragon, and our sleepers. Now if we wanted to use one of these factions, say we wanted to add some Flame Dawn, we've changed our mind, we no longer want Genesis Industries, we want Flame Dawn instead, you can go up to that commander, double click on him, and that will remove him from your deck. Now we can come on over to Flame Dawn, make sure the card we want selected is showing up on that left hand slide. We'll go ahead and get a Bromic, and you go down and add them into that commander slot. And now we are able to use any Flame Dawn cards that is 1 purity. We could not use, say, for instance, the Agent Coil Firestarter, as he is a 2 purity cost, and over here we only have a 1 purity for Flame Dawn because of the 1 Flame Dawn commander we possess. Now that we have a good grasp on the purity system, we'll go ahead and finish rounding out our deck. In order to add cards into our deck, you can do one of 2 things. Select the card and then select Add Card, which will bring it over, or you can simply go to the card you want to add and double click on it. So we'll go ahead and add some more. And right now I'm randomly adding cards just to, like I said, round out the deck. I would not advise whatever this concoction ends up coming out as using it in game. Unless you really want to, then by all means go right ahead. Now, another thing I need to mention here is that when building a deck, you can use as many unlimited cards This is the unlimited card for Flame Dawn, as you want. There is no limit on how many you can put in a deck. However, for all other cards, there is a limit, and that limit is 3. You cannot use any more than, say, 3 Knights of the Flame Dawn. I could not have a 4th, unless it was in the commander slot. If the card is in the commander slot, it does not impact the number of cards down in the character slot. So for example, we'll go up to the Beast of Burden. I have a Beast of Burden up in my commander slot, but that does not do anything as far as the body of your deck. So I can still add 3 more to my deck. So in all actuality, you could potentially have 6 of an unlimited card in a deck if I wanted to, say, make Beast of Burden in all 3 of my commander slots and then put 3 down here. But you really won't see that very often. We'll keep adding cards here. Once again, we have 2 purity, so I'm allowed to use up to a 2 purity when we are selecting from the Varroa faction. Demon of Gluttony is a 2 purity card, so I'll go ahead and add a few of him. And what we're going to do is we're just going to basically keep adding cards until we get up to 40. 40 cards is the minimum amount of cards you have to have in a deck. No less than that. You can have as many cards as you want in the deck. If you want to have 300 cards in your deck, by all means, you can have 300 cards. But you have to at least have 40 for it to be considered a legal deck. And as I mentioned before, when it comes to purity, factionless cards are not hindered by purity restrictions, so we can add as many different types of non-faction cards as we want. Alright, we've just hit 40. As you can see, it says over here, and it's no longer in red. I'll go ahead and remove one of those cards so you can see it again. When you're under 40, the card number will be in red. As soon as you've hit 40, it goes to white. Also, another thing to notice, I'll do it again. Looking down at your deck legality, it's been telling us this whole time that right now we need to have at least a minimum of 40 cards. As soon as we've hit that minimum, it goes away, and currently our deck is legal because it has the minimum amount of cards and it is following all purity restrictions. Just to show you an example of what it would look like if you had a card that's purity restriction was higher than what you were allowed to have, we will go ahead. We don't have any Genesis Industries anymore as we removed that secluded constructor earlier. So I'll go ahead, I'll just add an unending drone to my deck, and as you can see, as soon as I did that, my deck legality changed. It now says that I require a Genesis Industries commander in order to use that card. If I don't have one of those, this deck is considered illegal and I'm not able to use it. So to make it legal again, we'll go ahead, double click and remove the card, and our deck is legal again. Now that we have at least 40 cards in our deck and we meet all purity requirements, we can go ahead and save the deck. Simply by coming over here and clicking on save. It'll ask us to save the current deck. You say yes, come on over to your deck collection, and then simply scroll down, and there is our deck example. Now, let's say we wanted to rename it. We don't like example anymore. Click on rename, and we'll type in a new name. Once we have the name we would like it to be, go ahead and click on rename, and it will have changed. We'll come up here, we'll go ahead and look for that new name, and there it is. Now, while putting this deck together, I wasn't really looking at the cards I was making. It was more just to show you how to build a deck. This deck is not what I would deem worthy to play, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it at this point in time. It is my currently selected deck. I'll come up to delete. It'll ask me if I would like to delete Teramis as a Puffster. Of course. Click on delete. And it's gone. And it's actually switched over to a brand new deck. And that's why you see all these different cards here now. And that will conclude my tutorial on how to navigate the new card collection screen. I hope this helps all of you. Once again, my name is Tyanitis, and I look forward to seeing you all in game.